Well, welcome to week 3 of our Lent Discipleship series, Backyard Disciples. And I'd love to introduce to you Paul Wetsick. Paul is one of the 4 people who helped pull together this content for us during Lent. He is one of the most amazing blokes I've met in Australia in terms of how we might explore what it is to simply be church in simple and organic ways and get beyond the idea of going to church, but really find out what it might be for us to be church together. And so the idea that we might be playing this game that draws us closer to Jesus and invites others to come on that journey is very much his kettle of fish and his game. Paul, great to have you with us, mate.
Thanks, Phil. It's lovely to be here and coming to you live from my bedroom, which is the quietest room in the house while everybody else attempts to go to bed.
So the passage that's there from John chapter 6 comes after a lot of his referring to himself as the bread of life. He makes a lot of analogies about the manna from heaven for God's people when they're traveling through the wilderness and so on. And then he comes to this point where he says, if you believe, then you're going to be somebody who eats my flesh and drinks my blood. And it's a strange thing. And a lot of people go, oh, this is a hard teaching. And it is. And then at that point, John says, and many people left him. And he turns to the disciples and he says, what about you? Are you too going to go away? And I reckon Peter's probably thought about that a few times, actually. I reckon Peter and the others have thought back to, well, it would be simpler fishing, that's for sure. And he says, no, we have come to believe that you are the one who holds the knowledge and the words of life. And after all, where else would we go? So I wonder what it is for us in that sense of being in a team and belonging together. How do you understand communion? That moment where we break the bread and we share the wine and we say, we belong together.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Phil. I think it's really interesting in light of those passages that you mentioned, with all of those references to Jesus speaking about being the bread of life. And prior to that, the story is of the feeding of the thousands of people, where there's bread and loaves. There's just this incredible little chunk in John 6 of food and eating. And the thing that strikes me about it is that it is, when Jesus talks about bread and wine, he's talking about kind of the daily food that people take, the meals that people would have shared together. We're very used to doing dinners on our own, whether it be with our family or even more isolated these days, it's random bits of family eating at any given time when somebody's home. But this whole idea of eating within that context would have been communal meals, people coming together with shared experience of the day, maybe if they'd been working together, or shared experience of where they were. And I think as I look and reflect on this Passover story and of who Jesus gathers with him, these are the closest people to him in this instance. These are the people who as they've chosen him, he's chosen them to be a part of the group who would travel with him and be a part of his life.
There's so much in that, and he speaks about being broken to be shared. And in the feeding of the thousands, what's important is that this bread is broken and shared. And there doesn't seem to be right, we just need to know that you've all signed a creed here. Have we all recited the liturgy together? No, it's just broken and shared. And there's a fabulous openness in that. And so if we say that disciples are people who follow Jesus more closely and invite others to come too, then there's this wonderful thing that is very much about generosity and sharing. And when we are together, it's not an exclusive thing. Other people need to know that they are welcome to come and be with us in whatever it is that we are doing. One of the things that I struggle with a little bit, how do you think Protestants in particular go with mystery? Like when John writes this passage, and there are people who go, body, blood, this is a bit hard. No, we're out. How do we explore something that is actually deeply mysterious? It's not just a loaf of bread and some plonk. There's something going on here that speaks of who we are and whose we are.
Yeah, mystery is something we don't do well with, is my experience. We generally like black and white, certainty, science, facts. Most of us aren't good sitting with mystery and the inexplicable, I guess you'd have to say. And I think that is one of the incredible things. And in that passage where Jesus says, you've got to eat my body and drink my blood, within a Jewish context, that is deeply offensive. That is deeply, so no wonder people said, this is a hard teaching, I'm out of here. And I think it's that same mystery that we get invited into, that mystery of Jesus' body broken and his blood shed for us, is a mysterious act that we try so often to say, well, it equals this and it means that. But actually, there's far deeper implications and potential consequences of partaking in the community of Jesus and partaking in this celebration of his brokenness, and what that looks like for us when he says, emulate me, go and do as I do. The challenge that sits in that is, well, if Jesus was broken and poured himself out, what does that mean for me?
Yeah, and that his life flows through us. That John also does that wonderful passage with the vine, and I'm the vine and you're the branches, says Jesus, and so his very life force flows through us and is shared by us in this moment, and in that is a wonderful generosity that comes in that. I want to ask you a personal question, Paul, and I hope anybody who's watching on is okay to wrestle with this. When some of the disciples said, no, this is too hard, and Jesus turns to even the ones who know him best, and what about you guys? Have there ever been moments where you thought, no, this is too hard and I'm ready to walk away?
Yes, Phil, I think they probably have. I think it's in the moments of for me, it's been in the moments where my nicely contained images and understanding of God and how God operates in my life and in the world have been challenged by circumstances of life, by pain and suffering, by grief, by loss, that I've been invited numerous times into saying, well, is this all just a load of rubbish and I can find something better to believe in and better to do with my time? So that's absolutely happened at various points in my life, where those spaces of genuine wrestling with what is it that I believe and why have emerged.
I have a sense in which that brings us back to this question for the week of who do you play with? Because if you find yourself all alone at those moments, that is often too hard to bear. But what it is when Jesus says to that group of people, what about you? He's asking them as a team. And Peter speaks on their behalf in a sense when he says, well, we have come to understand and to believe somehow amidst all the craziness and all the stuff that's going on, you are the Holy One of God, and where else would we go anyway? And I think in looping in the communion, and isn't that a powerful word, that there is a shared oneness, that is a community that actually belongs together. And I think for me, one of the worst things we could do in that moment of breaking the bread and sharing the wine is just to say the words, go through the motions. No, what we're doing here is something that actually speaks about our community and our communion and what it is when we are broken, when we feel like we're poured out, but we are in this together and we belong together. That's who we play with. It's almost the ultimate team experience. And that's why it's so beautiful to invite others to come into the life of this and to find their place within it, that we might draw nearer to Jesus and invite others to also draw nearer to him. And after all, where else would we go?
That's right. And I think it's also the beauty of it being not in the moment of peak performance or when everything's going right, where everything's perfect, where we've nailed it all. This is a celebration of death, of suffering and brokenness. It is in recognizing and leaning into that we are actually sharing our humanity, that for each one of us, we have experienced all kinds of degrees of brokenness, all kinds of degrees of failure and death, whatever that looks like. And this celebration together is a remembrance of God's engagement in that space, that this is not a God who sits purely as one who is above and beyond pain and suffering and grief, but actually intimately shares it with us and redeems it, allows new life to come out of it, allows something beautiful to be fashioned. The image in my head is that Japanese craft where they take broken pottery and use gold. I think it's called kinasagi or something like that, where they take gold and they fill the gaps, and you've taken this broken bowl, but because of the inclusion of the gold to pull it all back together, the beauty is enhanced. That's just the image in my head around what this coming together means.
This is a hard thing for us to understand. And I think Jesus is saying, it's okay. You don't have to understand it all. You don't have to have everything in a neat liturgical, theological box. This is a mystery. But I want you to draw in and become a part of this. And somehow with Peter, we get to say, yeah, we have come to know. Not just know, but know you are the Holy One. You are the one we want to follow, Jesus. And there is nowhere else we'll go. Paul, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it this evening.
It's been a pleasure, Phil. It's always fun to work with you and to do whatever I can to help explore what this means to follow Jesus' way.
We got another 3 or 4 weeks of this, and we are enjoying the content and the stuff that it stirs within us. So every blessing, Paul.
Thanks, Phil. Great to chat.
So here's the challenge for this week. Find somebody else from the community, make some time to sit and talk, get a coffee, and share honestly your stories of doubting and the times you walked away or thought about walking away. What keeps you following Jesus and wanting to be a part of his community?